to introduce the Minwick State Coordinator, Burke Murphy. And thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everybody. Can you see my screen? You seeing one slide or many? Okay, there we go. Let's try this. Perfect. Good morning. We're so excited. You can hear the enthusiasm that Alex is sharing, and we are all here to participate and support this wonderful conversation. I want to introduce you to Renewing the Countryside, which is the nonprofit that has sponsored this initiative for over 20 years. They've been supporting and connecting stewards of land and farms with necessary resources. We want to thank the NRCS for funding this Minwick initiative now in our third year, and particular thanks to the Minnesota branch of NRCS. Our objectives are to welcome all women in agriculture and land stewardship and increase women's knowledge, understanding, and use of conservation, climate-smart practices, and in particular, NRCS programs. We are here to shepherd women through the process of program assistance, connecting you with the people and the resources that you might need. And what we have been doing for the past 2 years is building a legacy of relationships and regional networks, which you'll see a little bit more later. Our priorities are to equip you to be able to develop your own conservation plan, support you through the process, and build these peer-to-peer networks regionally. This is an example of how we've gathered with women. This was a wonderful sharing our stories from the field learning circle that we held in Fergus Falls last year. And this is a wonderful group of 34 women that we were able to support to attend the Sustainable Farm Association Grazing Summit in St. Cloud. And we want to celebrate with everyone the International Year of the Woman Farmer. This map reflects the 1,700 women that we have been able to reach so far in this initiative. We have made contact with women in 84 of Minnesota's 87 counties, and we hope that you will continue to help us turn the state map green and grow our capacity to be stewards of the land. I want to bring to your attention, yesterday there was an incredible field day with our partner Wild Farm Alliance, and some of our team were there tabling for Minwick. It was an impressive day. We have another field day happening on Friday in collaboration with the Great Heritage Farm in Winthrop, Minnesota, on Friday from 5 to 8. If you're interested, I think it's going to be a wonderful field day. I've been told that local meat and protein produced has been brought to the pizza parlor who's making the pizzas. So it's really very much a circular event. And then in August, there's a field day and tour with cattle women and NRCS with an NRCS grazing trailer that is you'll see on our website. Now we are having a webinar in August that we want to bring to your attention with Soil and Water Conservation District and Pheasants Forever to explain to us their role in conservation. And they have been great partners for us, and we want to elevate their work and their role with the women who join our webinars. So please contact us if you would like help, one-on-one help as opposed to virtual help. We have 4 regional coordinators. Allison and Alex and Ginger are with us this today, and Maddie, who's our communications specialist. And I am your state coordinator. So we will at the end ask if you would take a minute to complete a survey poll that Maddie will generate for you so that we can get some feedback, because we listen to you, we pay attention to you, and we sure appreciate your being with us. So thanks very much, Alex. I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Burke. All right. And I am going to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Jessie Moravek is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Minnesota, whose work focuses on freshwater ecology, river restoration, and the role of beavers in climate adaptation. Ooh, fly. She is an expert in modeling where beavers might build dams, which helps prioritize restoration activities. Jessie also has a background in water quality monitoring and fish habitat conservation, which eventually led her to working on beavers because it turns out beavers help with both of these things. Jessie lives in Minneapolis and loves to observe the resident urban beavers along the Mississippi River. Thanks so much, Jessie.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everybody. Let me just get my screen shared here. And let's see. Can everybody see that okay? Got a thumbs up? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm delighted to be able to speak with you today. Like Alex said, my name is Dr. Jessie Moravek. I'm a postdoc at the University of Minnesota, and that means I'm a beaver scientist. I work in the Fairfax Beaver Lab, and I do all beavers all the time these days. If I look a little bit familiar to you, it might be because you saw me yesterday down at Sharing Our Roots Farm, where I talked about their very excellent beaver dam that they have over there and all the work they're doing to coexist with beavers on their farm. That was really fun. So if you're seeing me for the second time in 2 days, welcome back. We can never talk too much about beavers, so I'm excited to get started. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about beavers, what they do, what they are, and I'm going to talk about some of the benefits that beavers can have for our ecosystem. And then my colleague, Jen Vanderhoof, is going to talk about the history of beavers in Minnesota and a little bit more about how to coexist with beavers when they start causing problems. Jen is an expert in beaver coexistence, and I'm really excited to hear from her. So look forward to our second speaker today. Okay, so I am sure that a lot of people here have encountered beavers in one way or another. Whether you're canoeing in the boundary waters and you have to drag your canoe over a beaver dam and then a beaver slaps its tail at you, or maybe you have a beaver dam on your property and it's maybe flooding your field or your yard or your road. Or maybe you've walked along Minnehaha Creek in Minneapolis and seen the signs of beaver chewing on some of those big cottonwood trees. Beavers are all over the place. Beavers are a native species, not only in Minnesota, but in almost all of North America. Their native range is from Mexico all the way up to the Arctic. And they are just a highly adaptable species that can persist in deserts and mountains and forests and prairies. And we have them all over the continent. The reason beavers can live in so many different types of environments is because they're what we call an ecosystem engineer. An ecosystem engineer is an animal that changes its environment to make better habitat for itself. Humans are probably the best known example of ecosystem engineers, and beavers are probably like the second best well-known type of ecosystem engineer. The most visible and common version of beaver engineering is their dams. Beavers build dams like I have pictured in that photo on the right there. And beaver dams are really important because most of our streams in North America look something like that little photo on the bottom. They're really narrow, they're quite straight, there's a lot of erosion, and there's really minimal connection between the stream and the surrounding land. So all of those riparian plants or plants and trees that like to grow close to water are not really growing very well. But when a beaver moves in and builds a dam that spans the width of the stream channel, that dam slows down the movement of water and it allows it to spread out onto the landscape. And this sort of like reactivates the ecosystem and allows some of those plants and trees to start growing again. But beavers are called busy beavers for a reason, so they're always working on their dam. They make it longer and taller and stronger. A lot of the times they build other little secondary dams in other little locations, and they're just always working on their dam. And the reason they're doing this is because they want to make a pond with water that's deep enough for them to dive down under the water and escape predators. But as they're building their dam, as you can see in that photo, beavers are using woody material. They're going out and chewing on trees and then taking that woody material and layering it with mud and stones and really whatever else they can find to make a really strong dam. And this is the second ecosystem engineering activity that beavers do, is they chew on trees. Beavers are selective tree chewers, so they really like to chew on willows and aspens and cottonwoods, but they will use any woody material they can find to build their dams. As beavers continue to chew on trees, the trees get farther and farther away from their pond. And this leads us to the third type of ecosystem engineering that beavers do, which is they dig canals. Beavers dig little beaver canals that act as little highways that allow them to swim out, gather their woody material, and then bring it back to this pond from the safety of the water. And these canals also kind of act like a drip irrigation system that moves water from the main stream channel and the main pond out across the landscape. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the reason beavers are building dams and making ponds is because they want to be able to swim. Beavers are a semi-aquatic rodent, which means they are really well adapted to swimming. They have a lot of cool adaptations that make them really good at swimming. For example, beaver fur is waterproof. So their furs are so densely packed on their skin that when a beaver is in the water, its skin stays dry. So they're nice and warm and dry even when the water's cold. They can close their nose and close their ears. They have a weird third eyelid that acts like goggles and can keep their eyes protected. They have like a second set of lips that closes behind their teeth to keep their airway protected. They have webbed back feet and a weird paddle tail that helps them steer. They're really good at swimming. But when you take that same animal and put it on land, they're really awkward, right? All of a sudden the paddle tail is like dragging behind them. Half their feet are webbed. And an adult beaver weighs between 60 and 100 pounds. And so it's like this giant fuzzy bowling ball that is like not very agile on land. And that means is that if a predator shows up, like a wolf or a bear or a mountain lion or a human, beavers are like not really fast at running away. And so they build these dams that create these ponds that are deep enough for them to dive under the water and escape those predators. Beavers also build lodges, which are like their little house. As you can see in this picture here, a lodge has an underwater entrance, which is sort of like an attached garage. So a beaver can like go in the pond, escape the predators, and then just get right into the safety of their home, all from the safety of the water. Sometimes beavers don't build lodges. Sometimes they'll build a bank den, which is like the same idea, but it's in a river bank. But a lot of times, especially in Minnesota, we do see beavers with lodges. Beavers, importantly, don't just chew on trees because they want building materials. They also chew on trees for food. This is really important to emphasize. Beavers do not eat fish. They do not eat bugs. They do not eat plants, or they do not eat animals. They only eat plants. And beavers get most of their calories from the sugary inner bark of trees. So the cambium of trees. So you can see in that picture of the beaver chewing on the stick right there, that he is chewing the bark off of that tree. And that's because he's trying to get to the sugary inner bark of that branch. And that's where he's getting his calories. In the summertime, beavers also will eat aquatic plants, like this beaver is having a water lily enchilada. And they will also eat cattails and other things like that. But in the wintertime, when there's none of that stuff around, beavers are eating bark. So they do actually eat bark. Beaver wetlands are really, really important for biodiversity. When a beaver builds a pond, they're creating a lot of different types of habitat on the landscape. Instead of just having that one straight, narrow, channelized stream, now all of a sudden you have a little bit of fast-moving water, then you have slow-moving water in the beaver wetland, you have some like marginal areas with deeper and shallower water, and then you have fast-moving water again once you get past the beaver wetland. With all of this habitat diversity means there's a lot of different little niches for different types of plants and animals to survive. So in beaver wetlands, we see higher diversity of birds, bats, fish, amphibians, reptiles, insects like butterflies and dragonflies, and also a bunch of different types of water bugs. And then we also see a lot of different types of mammals. In this video, oh, there's sound. Oh my goodness. There's a blue heron and a raccoon hanging out on a beaver dam in this video. Oh my gosh, and over here there's a deer and a raccoon. Didn't know there was going to be sound in those videos. That's exciting. But beavers are creating a lot of habitat for a variety of animals. Beaver wetlands also create really good habitat for plants that we care quite a lot about. There's a lot of wetland plants that are native to Minnesota that we really want to conserve. For example, wild rice is common in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, and it's an important indigenous food, but wild rice fields are declining. And the thought is that because beaver make wetlands and wild rice grows in wetlands, that there might be a relationship between beavers and wild rice. And so this is a little video of what used to be a wild rice lake in northern Wisconsin, but now it's been overtaken by these water lilies. And the hope is that when beavers come back to this area, hopefully the wild rice will also come back. And my colleague, Mickey Garrity at the University of Minnesota is leading some really awesome work on this. The other cool thing that beavers do is they improve water quality. I love talking about beavers and water quality because I used to study water quality. So in Minnesota, especially in our more agricultural parts of Minnesota, one of the big water quality struggles that we have is too much nitrogen. Or nitrates. Nitrates are basically what's in fertilizer that we put on our farm fields. And a little bit of nitrate is good for plants because it makes them grow faster. But when you have too much nitrate, like, for example, when it rains and all that fertilizer runs off the farm field and ends up concentrated in a body of water, then it makes the plants grow too much. And we end up having like gross algae blooms and weird stuff like that that we really don't want. When you have a beaver wetland, they really reduce the amount of nitrate in the water. This is a little bit of a complicated graph, but the green line is the amount of nitrates removed from a stream with no beaver dam, and the blue line is the amount of nitrates removed from a stream with a beaver dam. And you can see that the place with the beaver dam removes like 50% more nitrate than the place without a beaver dam. If you were on Sharing Our Roots Farm with me yesterday, we heard Nick talking about how they've done nitrate sampling before and after the beaver at farm, which is again down in Northfield. And they have found that the same pattern occurs here in Minnesota, and that their nitrate levels are really decreased after the beaver wetland. And this is happening because when you have a beaver dam, it slows down the movement of water and it gives the plants and the microbes that are present in the wetland and also in the surrounding and underlying soils time to process the nitrogen. So like the plant and microbes that are in there can like eat up the nitrogen, and which we call fixing nitrogen. And then when the water flows eventually out of the beaver dam, there's much less nitrogen, which is awesome. The other cool thing that beaver wetlands do is reduce the amount of sediment in water. Sediment is like normally in water, and that's okay. But when you have too much sediment, sometimes it can hold on to carbon, and it can also hold on to things like heavy metals, which are things that we don't want to be in our water system. So when you have a beaver dam, again, it slows down the movement of water, and sediment tends to kind of drop out of the water column and hang out in the beaver pond. And that like removes all the carbon and heavy metals and other things that that sediment is carrying from the rest of the waterway. This is also important in fire situations. This is an example from Colorado. You can see in the photo on the left that was taken before a fire that that beaver pond doesn't really have very much sediment in it. And then in the photo on the right, you can see all the black stuff at the back of the beaver pond is ash that has washed out from the fire after the first rain post-fire. And so now all of that icky ash and stuff is not going to end up in the municipal waterway that's downstream of this wetland. This is probably going to be something that starts happening in northern Minnesota and Canada, especially this year with all the bad fires we're having up there. So beavers are really important for holding back sediment in this way. The final thing about water quality that I wanted to talk about is temperature. I think it's a little counterintuitive. When you look at a beaver pond, you're like, it's stagnant water. There's all these plants growing in here. It must be hot. And sometimes it is. But if you go in enough beaver ponds, you will discover that if you go to the deepest part of the beaver pond, the water down at the bottom is quite cold. And that is because beaver ponds are connecting to groundwater a lot of the time. And so if a beaver pond is able to access some of the groundwater that's flowing underneath it, that water is cold because it's underground. And so a lot of times, again, kind of counterintuitively, beaver ponds are actually reducing the temperature of the water. This is an example from a study out west where they restored beavers in 5 different streams. And they found that in 4 out of the 5 streams, the temperature went like way down compared to before they had the beaver dams in there. This is really important in Minnesota for things like trout. Trout are fish that really require cold water. And as the climate changes, we're starting to worry about trout having enough cold water to survive. And so we are like really thinking about ways to make sure the water stays cold. And one thought is that having more beaver dams on the landscape might, in certain cases, help reduce the water temperature. Oh, here's a diagram. So in streams with beavers, there's like not a lot of connection between the stream and the groundwater. And then when you have a stream with beavers, the water is like, there's so much water in the pond that it is sinking deeper and connecting more to groundwater. So that's why the water ends up being colder. Okay, now I want to talk about a buzzy topic, which is beavers and fire resistance. If you've seen the recent movie Hoppers, which is a Pixar movie about beavers, very exciting movie, you'll notice that the beavers in this movie have some relationship with fire. There's a fire that happens in the movie. And this is based on science. Beaver wetlands are resistant to wildfire. This is a little bit of a complicated diagram, but what's happening here is that a beaver wetland is wet and wet things don't burn. Imagine taking like a lighter out to like a goopy, sloppy, smushy beaver wetland and trying to like light things on fire. It would be really hard because everything is damp. And not only is like the exact area of the wetland resistant to fire, but that water of the beaver wetland moves out into the surrounding landscape, and all of those riparian plants and vegetation, or the things that are growing right next to the wetland, are green and happy and hydrated. And those things are also really hard to set on fire. So not only do beavers create like a wetland pond where the fire is not going to burn, they also create a little bit of a buffer around them where things are green and hydrated and not going to burn. And this makes them resistant to fire. This phenomenon is incredibly consistent across many, many fires that we've looked at across North America. This is an example from California. You can see that the beaver wetland here is green and everything else around it is brown and burned. So these beaver wetlands are creating these really important little like emerald beads of hope on the landscape that are allowing plants to survive, helping wildlife survive during the fire, and also help with post-fire recovery. So these little patches of green of surviving plants and animals and insects and things like that are going to be able to reseed the surrounding landscape and help things recover. This is particularly stark in the American West, like California, Colorado, Wyoming, where they've been having like really big, really serious fires for like about a decade or longer. And so we see this pattern really significantly. But as the climate changes, unfortunately, as we are currently experiencing, big fires that are out of control and bigger than we are expecting or equipped to deal with are going to become more common in Canada and northern Minnesota. And so fires are right on our doorstep. And in fact, they're here this week and last week. And so beavers are really important for helping us deal with fire. We are observing this like right now. We have seen evidence of wildlife in the Minnesota fires using beaver wetlands as refuge. This is an Instagram post from the Voyageurs Wolf Project from last week. They have a bunch of wolves that are GPS collared up in Voyageurs National Park. And you can kind of see, as you can see in this image, the white line is the track of where the wolf is located. And this wolf like hung out in a beaver meadow for 10 hours. Right next to this giant fire. The wolf was like not very far away from the fire. And that's probably because this wolf knows that that beaver wetland is safe because it's not going to burn. It's a safe spot for that animal to be. And I bet you that the wolf was not the only animal hanging out in all of those beaver wetlands that you can see here. I think the beavers were probably not very happy about having a wolf visitor hang out for quite so long in their beaver wetlands, and I hope the beavers stayed in their little and are okay. But either way, the wolf is definitely okay, so that's good for them. Our group has not yet had a chance to assess how beavers fared or responded to the fires in northern Minnesota right now. We have to wait for the smoke to clear before we can get good satellite imagery of what's going on. And we are certainly not taking any drones up there while there's any firefighting going on. But once the smoke clears and things calm down, and we're able to look at some good imagery of what's going on up there, we are pretty sure that we're going to see that beaver wetlands again are creating fire-resistant patches in northern Minnesota. It's a little counterintuitive because there's so many lakes up there, and there's certainly beavers in and on the lakes. If you've ever been to the Boundary Waters, you're aware of that. But there are also beavers in the interstitial little rivers and low spots that are connecting the lakes that we don't really access very often. So there are beavers all over the place up there. Finally, I wanted to end on a little maybe like note of hope. I think the fires up in northern Minnesota are like pretty scary right now. But I was just up there like 3 weeks ago with a team of my colleagues from the University of Minnesota, and we were doing research on beavers. And we came across this photo, which is taken by my colleague Alyssa. And as you can see in this photo, this is a beaver meadow. We're looking at an active beaver lodge, but this meadow has burned before. You can see that these trees are blackened and burned, and there's like some burn scarring going on in there. And so you can tell that beavers and fire have coexisted in northern Minnesota for a really long time, and they will continue to coexist for a really long time. As of this week, this spot has burned again. And so we're going to be able to go back and we're going to be able to see what has happened to these beavers. And hopefully they will have survived and they're going to keep doing their beaver thing, and keep helping us with our water quality and our biodiversity and our fire resistance and all of the other good things that they do for us. Okay, that's all I got for now. Thank you so much, everybody.
Dang, thank you so much, man. And you were like on time. That's amazing.
Oh.
Wow. Not that matters, because that was a lot of great. Look at all these claps. All right, and thank you so much, Dr. Jessie, for this presentation. And someone asked if slides would be shared, and I'll reach out to Jessie and see if that's cool. And hey, Jen, and now Jen's here, and thanks for joining us, Jen. Yes, wonderful. Okay, and I will introduce Jen Vanderhoof is a wildlife ecologist in the science section at King County, Washington, where she has worked since 1999. Over the years, her varied work has included a wide variety of wildlife, riparian, wetland, and biodiversity projects. For the past 10 years, much of Jen's work has centered around beavers and beaver-adjacent topics, including researching new planting techniques at restoration sites, consulting on restoration design, policy, and helping problem solve for colleagues countywide. And thanks, Jen, for answering some of these great questions in the chat, too. And now, Jen, you have a slide to share, and I see this white block right now. So, excellent. Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't started sharing yet, so I'm not sure whose white block that is. But I've worked on beavers for 10 years, and I also spend most evenings and weekends thinking about them and going out and trying to see them. So they've pretty much encompassed my life. I'm going to try to share. Here we go.
Wonderful.
Is that looking good?
Very. And funny.
Okay. All right. So I titled my talk Beavers Navigating Human Values because something that I've discovered is that as human values go, so go beaver populations. And hopefully that'll make more sense by the time I'm done. So the truth about beavers. Turns out there's actually a lot of untruths and myths that are commonly spread about beavers. And I didn't come here with the intention of myth busting. Rather, what I hope to do today is tell you a little bit about the fur trade history in Minnesota and then hopefully create a foundation for you to raise your own questions and healthy skepticism in the face of things that you might hear about beaver populations or beavers in general. A lot of the information that I pulled out of this super cool 1963 technical bulletin. A lot of states wrote bulletins like this that were funded by the 1937 Federal Aid in Wildlife Restoration Act. So just think about that for a second. Way back then, we recognized a need to restore wildlife, especially beavers. And so there were a lot of states that produced, and most states had a program, and many produced reports like this, and they're chock full of really cool information. So much of the fur trade history that I'm going to talk about, I pulled out here. So just quick intro of the fur trade in general. It started on the Canada coast, or what is now Canada, in the early to mid 1500s. So pretty much shortly after white people landed on the East Coast. This started happening. It was pretty informal. About 100 years later, by the early 1600s, it's getting a lot more formal. It's getting more structured and a lot more deadly. And it starts slowly marching westward and southward. So there's kind of a band that's slowly coming across the continent. And by the 1680s, it's well underway in Minnesota. And I find it really interesting that it was booming 100 years later. So you have 100 years of fur trade happening, and it keeps going. We've got forts, posts, fur trading posts being set up in there's a couple that were set up in 1783, still going, 1792, 94. And not until the early 1800s are you starting to see people saying, hey, wait a minute, there's not as many beavers as there used to be, and starting to think about maybe we should keep moving west for the fur trade. So I think I want to point this out. If anybody tells you there were not that many beavers in Minnesota historically, that's just not right. There's no way that you could support a fur trade for this long. Probably millions and millions of beavers were trapped out in the early, in that period between the 1680s and the early 1800s. So beaver numbers in decline in the early 1800s, and interestingly, apparently people were blaming disease and forest fires and even wolverines. They were not looking inward. They were not blaming the fur trade. But because of the declining numbers, the focus is shifting west. And in fact, it was in 1811 that John Jacob Astor established his post at the mouth of the Columbia River out here, down at Oregon coast. And it wasn't until 1842 that John Jacob Astor's American Fur Company went away. It kind of imploded. He still had other operations happening, but that pretty much marked the end of the primary fur trade in Minnesota itself. Didn't mean beavers weren't continuing to be harvested and harassed and killed. And in fact, I found another paper that showed that hundreds of thousands were still being harvested even after that. So that it went on. There were still beavers around. They were still being harvested. And what I think is really interesting is it's about this same time frame, 1830s to 1849, 1850, where European settlement is just happening. So massive fur trade has been going on for a really long time. And then settlers are just starting to come. They aren't even starting to farm until 1840s through 1870. And that's pretty early farming. And I think it's a key to think about when you think about how much changed before settlers were even present. So long about 1875, there were people saying, hey, we want more beavers because we want to trap more beavers. So legislature passed a law that prohibited trapping just in the season, not year round, but in this May 1st through November 1st season. Beavers were still declining though. And so after many, many years apparently of debate and arguing and who knows what else, finally in 1909, the legislature prohibited taking beavers in Minnesota at any time. So they're like, stop, we're just going to stop for a while. and let the numbers recover. And because beavers are rodents, they only reproduce once a year, but still they are rodents. Population stopped declining, and within 10 years, there were lots of complaints about nuisance beavers. So they started coming back finally. And because of the complaints and because they wanted to start draining bogs, they went ahead and issued these permits, and over this 4-year period, about 7,000 beavers were taken, mostly from ditches that were draining bogs. And then the drainage of all the peatlands, turns out it created tremendous fire hazard. There were lots of forest fires. And so people started welcoming beavers back because they're like, hey, they hold water back, as Jessie mentioned. So real roller coaster here for the beaver populations. And when the droughts ended in the late 30s, forestry became a pretty big industry, and people started hating on the beavers again. They were once again vilified. So, not surprisingly, we get an open trapping season again in 1939, and there was just this 1-week period from May 2nd to May 9 where about 11,000 beavers were harvested. It was just 1 week. So that gives you an idea. The beavers they're definitely back. We see the population continuing to expand because nobody's doing wholesale trapping like they were during the fur trade. And so the populations are going to be expanding. And then by the mid to late 1940s, there were beavers back in all 87 counties, and the beavers give a thumbs up to that. And just in case you're interested, it turns out that 9 of Minnesota's 87 counties are actually named after fur traders. So, fun fact. So why does this history matter? Other than I think it's really interesting, and I want to be a historian after I retire, among other things. But I think the better that we understand the past, the better we understand the present. We understand possible implications of the past, and maybe I think it helps us be reflective. It helps us make choices that are a lot more informed. We maybe don't make any different choices. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but then they're more informed and we have a better understanding of the implications. And so if you know that there were millions of beavers removed in the Minnesota area prior to European settlement, what might that mean? Like out here where I live and work in Washington State and Western Washington, I often think about the fact that we built a lot of roads basically underneath below what are historic or normal hydrologic levels, so the water table. So we have roads that are built under the water table, and now we're starting to have to deal with those problems, and that's just one example. So yeah, what might be different if beavers hadn't been so thoroughly removed? That's something I like to ponder and think about. And what are the trade-offs? What are the ecosystem trade-offs for knowing that we repressed beavers for so long? And I kind of come back to that idea of as go human values, so go beaver populations. And so I do feel like we're at a moment in history right now where we are starting to value them. And in fact, we are very well aware of the many beneficial functions of beaver activity. I know that Jessie touched on this, but just kind of as a reminder, I'll also emphasize, I could do an entire seminar on how they help us adapt to climate change. There's so many ways. All the water storage benefits is obviously a really big one. If I were given this talk out here, I'd be talking about healthy salmon populations. I added the ID because I don't know as much about trout, but I do know that out here, salmon, it's a really big deal. We've got listed species, and we know that beavers are good for healthy salmon populations. We know that they're giant water filters. Jessie touched on this as well. They improve downstream water quality, and they significantly increase biodiversity. It's one of my favorites. You can compare a beaver pond to a non-beaver pond of a similar size, and you're going to have more biodiversity in the beaver pond. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including all the different, they're super dynamic. There's a lot of habitat niches. And at the end, I'm going to point to a reference that if somebody really wants to dig into that more, I provide a bunch of citations. So I'll point you at that direction. So let's assume that we're like, yes, beavers are awesome. We know they do all these great things. And yet, I don't want them flooding my fill in the blank, my driveway, my road, my farm, my garage, whatever it happens to be. So I am going to spend the rest of my talk talking about some coexistence ideas. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert, but it sounds like maybe we implement more coexistence measures out here than maybe in Minnesota currently, but I suspect that that's going to change over time as well. So this is the easiest thing there is to do. I highly encourage people, if there's water, if you have land with water and you have any suspicion that beavers might be present, and you also have trees that you really don't want to see cut down, there's no reason to not be proactive and just put fence around them. This is a 2x4 mesh. It's 4 feet tall. You definitely want them 4 feet tall. Of course, in floods, beavers can swim above, but it's going to be fairly rare and most likely a smaller tree that they're going to cut down during a flood because they're going to have just smaller periods of time to do that. I've seen it, but this is just such an effective thing. And I've recommended people fence trees, and they look at me and they say, well, why would I do that? The beavers haven't started chewing yet. And I'm like, exactly. That's exactly right. They haven't started yet. So now's a really good time to protect the tree. And you don't have to be greedy. I love this. I did not make this recommendation, at least if I did, I don't remember doing so. But you have 2 trees right next to each other. If what you really want is to make sure and retain shade, you don't need both, probably. And so this is at a stormwater pond, and they just fenced one of the trees to make sure it stayed standing. Now, I love beavers. See what they're doing there. They're not cutting the tree down that's available. They're just taking the branches off of it because they're not dumb. Now, I know farming out there is huge, and frankly, the very biggest challenges that we have out here for dealing with beavers is in our ag lands. It's the holy grail, and I haven't solved it yet. I know that a small dam can affect somebody a mile away because of the flatness of the locations. This particular cornfield had beavers living in that ag ditch that kind of runs catty corner across the top third of the slide. I was informed that there were beavers there, and I actually set some cameras out and got them carrying corn back and forth. And they ended up cutting, you can see this pretty significant area where they removed the corn. The good news is this farmer was leaving the corn anyway for wildlife because he allows hunting there. He was not super keen on the dams, though, that the beavers were building out of corn stalks. So not just wood, but anything available, really, beavers will use, including corn stalks. I find it entertaining. The farmer did not particularly, and worked with, we've got a program called Beaver Wise out of one of our local agriculture related nonprofits they were working with the farmer to try to just help him be okay with the beavers being present. So anyway, I personally think that fence is very underused. And if you're wanting to keep beavers out of anything, whether it's a single tree or a farm field or an orchard, I think fence is very, very effective and underutilized. And I don't know why that is. There's some kind of a stigma associated with it or something. I'm not sure, but this is from a study. This picture is from a study that I'm currently doing. And what we did here, we planted these clumps of cottonwood and willow, and we fenced some of them and we didn't fence some of them. And beavers were present in this pond, and they'd been there since 2012. So I was like, this is going to be a great study site because we're going to really see what beavers do to these different planting techniques. And I have other treatments as well. So what ended up happening was they were there for the first year. They did all the things that I expected them to do. They ate a whole bunch of stuff, but then they left after all these years. So they weren't super cooperative. But I mentioned that because this photo was taken after the second season. So there was only beaver herbivory pressure in the first season, not even in the second season. So stuff was theoretically recovering and able to still grow. And yet you can barely tell that little unfenced one that I've got there that's circled. There's some sprigs coming out of there that are 1.5 meters tall. So on the left where it says tallest unfenced 1.5 meters, that should not be confused with the lushness of the canopy and the survival overall, because that 1.5 meters versus 5 meters, those are both on your screen right now, and you can tell there's a huge difference for the fenced ones. So I'm kind of a fence proselytizer currently. And I know that there are some people that have started trying to work with electric fence in ag areas. I'm definitely not an expert on that. I know somebody locally that's tried that, and she's had to deal with vegetation growing up, like weeds and stuff growing up and shorting things out. But when everything is maintained and functioning properly, it's been really effective. I have heard stories of beavers getting used to it and apparently being okay, either being okay, being shocked, or more likely they're only touching the wire with the back of their backs with their fur, and maybe they're not even feeling it. But it's something to explore for sure. And this group, Project Beaver, they're out of Oregon. They put some stuff together, so I put that link in there too. Now, in terms of flooding, culvert protection it's pretty straightforward. It's not too complicated. Out here, we have to think about fish passage, so most of the mesh size is a little bit larger than beaver practitioners would like, because it's big enough that small beavers can even get through it. But for the most part, this is a really effective way to keep beavers from blocking your culverts. And here's another picture of that. There's sort of this trapezoidal shape, so that when the beavers start trying to want to dam close to the where the water flow is concentrated near the culvert, they end up working further and further away as they go. Now, if you do happen to have a beaver that just keeps at it and gets all the way around there, you can also add a pipe in the fence that extends out further away, and then you cage off that pipe. And you've probably heard that whole contraption referred to as a beaver deceiver. This is just the pipe part, which is a very common way of controlling water levels in a beaver pond. We call them pond levelers. And these are such a great thing, because if you can get the height at a level that the beaver still finds acceptable, so the beavers are like, cool, we'll stay here. Thank you for not blowing up my dam. I can still stay here. And you've lowered the water level so that it's not flooding your, again, fill in the blank, whatever you don't want them to be flooding. And the way that it works, I put this little yellow line in here. The way that it works is at normal flows, not at flood flows, because at flood flows, water's going to flow over dams anyway. But at normal flows, the top level of the water in the pond, in the impoundment, is where the bottom of the pipe is. So that's what that yellow line is meant to indicate. It's like both the top of the water and the bottom of the pipe, they're the same, right? And you usually don't even have to worry about caging downstream. I don't know anybody that does. The water coming out, beavers don't care about that. You cage the one on the upstream end, because if the beavers detect that the water flow through the pipe, then they'll just plug it up. That's what they do at culverts. But if you put a cage around it, it makes it diffuse enough that the beavers don't even feel it. So they tend to leave those things alone entirely. Here's an example from where we had a landowner that was really unhappy with us and didn't want any water making any effects whatsoever. So we put in 2 pipes just to expedite the flow, but it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Because again, these are not for flood flow situations, they're for normal flow. So all you're trying to do is keep the water moving as it would, as if the pipes were not even there. It's just a way to, it's a kind of a permanent notch. If you're familiar with the idea of, oh, I'll go rip a little hole at the top of the dam to lower the water level, that's what this is. It's just that it's protected so that the beavers can't manipulate it and affect it. And there's just one more picture. They don't have to be really obvious and ugly. That one you can barely even tell it's there. And you do have at least one group out there in Minnesota doing this. It's looks like Emily Fairfax started up this group with a fellow named Andy Ricegraf, and I don't know much about them, but I mean I know a lot about Emily's work, of course, but I don't know that much about this outfit. But if you are having any kinds of coexistence issues, it seems like they might be the ones that you'll want to get in touch with. And then one last thing I noticed, it does appear that there are folks out there that are trying to get non-lethal beaver management, get it really going in a more formalized and more well-known and popular way with some legislation. As it looks like it didn't pass, or maybe it didn't make it out of committee. I'm not sure what happened, but this is not active. It died. But from my own experience in Washington, these are the kinds of things that usually take a few go-rounds before they do get passed. We had something similar a few years ago that didn't make it out of committee, but we made a lot of headway. And now the question is, when do we want to strategically bring it up again? So that, you do want to be strategic and think about politics and whatever else is on the docket that year and that kind of thing. But I suspect that if you Google around, you could probably find who's working on this if you wanted to get involved. The last thing I'm going to mention is this report. It's not a report, it's a manual that I put together. And I wrote it for restoration practitioners primarily with the idea that if you're planning a project, if you're going to be building something or designing something, especially if you're going to be putting plants in the ground, it's best to anticipate the presence of beavers and make decisions with the assumption that beavers are going to be there. And I'm going to be rewriting the entire thing. It should be, hopefully, I plan to have the completely revised version out in under a year, hopefully by June of next year. If you go to the King County Beaver website, you can sign up for the Beaver Bulletin, and then you'll be made aware when it's released. And somebody in the chat earlier was asking about biodiversity, and I think I misinterpreted the question possibly, but there is a section in the manual where I have an entire table. It's a page, and as I rewrite it, it's probably going to be more than a page, because I found there's so many references of all the different things that beavers do that positively affect other species, wildlife, fish, you name it. It's kind of across the board. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, that'll be in the there'll be even more information in the updated manual.
Woo! Thank you, Jen. Yeah. No, this is amazing. I need to get a better pun. Okay, that was beaverific. I'm working on it, and we'll work on it. Okay, we have everyone here. We're gonna take a quick photo, if you wouldn't mind getting all your cameras on your face, and Maddie will take a nice screenshot. Thank you so much to Jen and Jessie for your phenomenal presentations. That was like one fiery chat box. I would say the beavery. How do the damnedest chat? That's what it was. And we're gonna go through. I know a lot of them were answered, but Allison, our wonderful Q&A facilitator, is going to read the questions out loud. And Maddie, do I need to stop talking? Do you need to tell people?
I got the photo while you were telling your puns, because everyone is laughing because they're so good. That's the thing.
I got work to do. All right. So yes, Allison, take away the questions, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, folks, when you have to drop off, drop off. I mean, that's what has to happen. It's 4 minutes to 1. But we will post this recording on our website when it's all finished up. So you can definitely revisit it. There are so many questions in the chat. And some of them I think were answered during the presentations, perhaps. But also our two experts were great at finding the questions in the chat and answering them right in the chat. So if you haven't scrolled back through the chat, do that for sure. Now I'm just going to try to start at the top and keep going, and we'll get through as many as we can. So someone asked how they're curious how beavers respond in drought years, or does it even impact them?
It looks like we could both chime in with some thoughts. I think basically, as long as there's water and food, they're going to make do. I'm familiar with at least one place where it gets down to almost no water, and they're still there because there's still some water. And in fact, in this particular wetland that I'm thinking about, they've excavated out pretty much a channel through the wetland that does retain, in all but the driest years, retains some water. They're going to be more vulnerable, to predators for sure. They just are. Jessie, do you want to have more thoughts?
Yeah. What's useful about beavers during drought is that they've created a large amount of water that is, less susceptible to drying all the way down. So a lot of times, they're creating a little refuge habitat that still has water available, even though maybe there's not as much water in the rest of the waterway. So that can be really important for our aquatic species.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the coolest sort of micro observations I made was several Augusts ago, and it was the driest one I've seen out here, and almost everything was dry except for that little pocket right in front of it was actually next to the dam and also in front of a bank den. And there was still water in it, and a bear came through and just was able to cool off. It was a super hot summer, and the bear was like, "Thank you very much. I'm going to have a little cool off moment here." So I know the bear appreciated it. Yeah.
So there was a lot touched on about, where beavers live, where they can live, where they want to live, where we want them to live or not. Are there appropriate habitats and locations where beavers can and should be encouraged versus or relocated versus trapping or removing them lethally for nuisance? I don't know if that's something easily covered or not.
Yeah, we are working on models in Minnesota where we can predict how many dams a beaver is going to be able to build. So these types of models allow us to figure out this is a spot where there's enough water, there's enough trees, there's the right kind of flow conditions. And so a beaver is probably going to be able to build lots of dams here, as opposed to another place that might show us a beaver not being able to build as many dams. And so these types of models can really help us direct our restoration activities and be like, okay, so this stream on my property, if we had beavers in here, they'd be really happy. Versus maybe this is an area where beavers actually probably wouldn't be very successful building dams for whatever type of environmental reason. And so we like to use these types of models as a starting point for figuring out where to put beavers or not put beavers. But of course, there's a lot of other things that go into it. A lot of it has to do with landowner acceptance of beavers and willingness to deal with beavers and to implement some of the coexistence strategies that Jen talked about. And it just sort of depends on what people's feelings are about beavers.
Unfortunately, I don't think you can do live trapping and relocation in Minnesota. We do have programs out here, and I know in your past people have done it out there, but currently I don't believe it's legal. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. So I'm going to move on. Can beavers help with invasive species control? Somebody mentioned buckthorn in the chat.
By eating it all, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think buckthorn will grow anywhere, but
it was kind of a joke about the buckthorn. I was just saying
you want to make them
you want to make them popular, get them to eat them.
Well, out here we've got, I don't know about you, probably there too, reed canary grass, if that's a big problem. And they actually eat it, but you never know it, right? Because there's just so much of it. And they eat blackberry, but again, probably nothing that would ever take away as much as you would like for them to. So I could imagine a Far Side comic, the person holding the beaver like a power tool out there.
I've never heard of beaver eating buckthorn, but that doesn't mean they haven't been eating buckthorn. I just don't know about it. I hope they are, and I'm on the lookout all the time. It's definitely not one of their favorite foods, which is sort of unfortunate.
Yeah, I always say that like the world is their oyster pretty much. If it's green and growing, they'll eat it. But they absolutely have things that they prefer. And one of the coolest things is, at least out here, I know more about the Pacific Northwest than anywhere else yet. But most, if not everything, all the tree species that they favor all reproduce vegetatively. So I think that's fun to think about. They evolve together, and
Yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah.
Okay, there will be a survey that Maddie is gonna pop up. It'll pop up on your screens. I think we want to do that before we lose too many people. But we will continue the Q&A as long as our presenters are available to stay. But if you can all do the survey, that would be super helpful. It should just pop up 4 questions and hit submit. So there was I can't remember, Jessie, did you mention the nitrogen in the habitats?
Yep.
And so somebody Jen, I think then you answered that the nitrate pollution does not affect beaver health. What about phosphorus? We've seen a decrease in phosphorus as well, just like we do the
Yeah.
nitrates. Yeah.
Yeah. They help
Yeah.
process all of that kind of stuff.
All the pollutants.
Yeah. When you have the wetland plants are using phosphorus and nitrogen. I'm thinking about nitrates because I was on a farm yesterday, so we were talking about nitrates. But yes, they also will help process phosphates, which are also often in our fertilizer. A lot of time, yeah. And a lot of time we worry about both of them, certainly. And beaver wetlands, because again, slows down the movement of water, and you have water just kind of like hanging out in there where there's plants and microbes that can assimilate all of that stuff into their bodies. Then that like clears it out of the water column before it moves on.
I'm pulling this up right now. There was a really cool study that was done down in Gresham, Oregon at a stormwater pond. It was Katie Holzer, Dr. Katie Holzer did this. I'm just going to share my screen super quick again, just so you can see this graph from work she did. They had kind of a natural experiment where they had this big stormwater facility, and then beavers came in and built a whole bunch of dams. They were not intended to be there, but they ended up there. So they were able to have sort of pre-dam and post-dam and during dam water collection. And this is what they found. And I think it's pretty telling. She just recently published this in a peer-reviewed journal, actually, but this is from one of her talks. I grabbed it. So pretty impressive what beaver dams can do.
Yes, that's really great. How about the economic value of beavers? Is there research or like actual hard data that maybe policymakers would look at and use when it came to preserving beavers?
I know of a couple of studies, maybe 3, and one of them at least is in a peer-reviewed journal and shareable. Some folks I know out here are trying to get additional studies done. I'm not quite sure how that work's going. I was supposed to be involved in that, and I haven't heard anything from them in a while, so we'll see about that. But I can envision how I would want to go about doing something like that, but it would be such a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
Because of all the cascading effects of things that they do, and when you remove them, all that is lost. And so, yeah, it's not easy, but like I said, there is one paper that I can try to find and share. Jessie, are you gonna?
That might be interesting if you can get a hold of it. Jessie, anything from you on that one?
Yeah,
No.
second Jen on that. Oh yeah.
Okay. A lot of the rest of these questions were answered a bit in the chat, but like, have you worked with any city planners, EDA? I don't know, what is an EDA director? To include beavers in city planning and environmental review?
Yeah,
I think someone answered this.
Yes, I can say it again though. We my group, the Fairfax Beaver Lab at the University of Minnesota, has not worked a ton with the city planners. But I do have a colleague who's been working with the Lake Friends of the Lake Hiawatha board, and they've been incorporating the presence of beaver in that area into their plans. And so, for example, they are planning to overplant trees because they know beaver will take some percentage of the trees. And so we are, sometimes I will, when I see a beaver fence around a tree and it's made of chicken wire and about a foot tall, which is not going to stop a beaver, trust me. Beavers are way bigger than that and also strong and heavy. And so if I see a fence that is not good, then I email that park board and I say, your fence won't work, just so you know. Yeah, so we're sort of building up those relationships though in the cities.
Yeah.
Jesse, if you want to talk more about adding density, we can do that offline, because I know a lot of people do that, and what I learned is beavers don't we know they cut things down, so you plant something, they cut it. We know that. What I learned in my research, which is still ongoing, is that sometimes they don't cut things, they just defoliate them. And so they'll come in the spring when all the leaves are out, they're like, thank you, and they just eat all the leaves off of it. And so you might not even know that you and I might know that it was a beaver, but most people probably would have no idea what happened, and it resets everything, right? And so that's why that sad looking little clump in my picture hadn't even had beaver pressure in a year, but it was just like toast, and so that's why I'm so keen on fence. My colleagues are like, oh, we just doubled the density. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. There are going to be some fat and happy beavers.
Oh yeah.
You're constantly resetting everything back to zero. You're not going to get trees. And so I'm such a huge fan of both. We want to grow trees and we want to feed the beavers. We want to do both. And so I would never fence everything unless it's a farm. That's a different story. But if you're trying to have a healthy ecosystem and you want some trees, fence a clump, fence an island. This is all going to be in my manual. And then I suggest maybe leaving it for 6 years, because by the time you take that fence off, you're going to have some pretty substantial, young trees in there. And then you can pick out 1 or 2 and wrap them and let the beavers have the rest. And everything else that's in there is also going to be bigger and provide more food. Whereas when you first plant something, it's not a lot of food. So if they take it out, they're just going to take everything. Anyway, clearly I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but.
Well, I feel like we could sit here for another hour and just talk about beavers, but I wonder if
or
we
2
should
or
maybe
3
wrap up. Well, I mean, yeah, and that all 87 counties have a beaver population is really
They did in the 40s. They did in the
40s.
I stopped tracking. I'm assuming that is still true, but that was history. I don't know the current state of things. So.
And something that I talk a lot about with Minwick is Minnesota has these separate biomes. We're a very ecologically diverse, geologically diverse state. And so even when it comes to an animal like beavers, their impact is different across the state because we have different types of land use, land geography, so up here it's well, we have so many beavers that flood our small rural roads because they clog the culverts, or they, do this, or they'll we have a lot of wetlands, so they'll be working in the wetlands and then that will flood the hayfield. So it's every place is different really about how they can like what the pest situation is or the benefit situation is. And I find that so fascinating and I want to learn it all. But yeah, if anybody's got like one more question, or speakers, if you have one more thing to say, I mean, I'm here for it. I could sit here all day.
You should Google a baby beaver
Oh,
if you're bored. It's very cute.
yes, I'm sure it really is. Yeah,
Like a
Alex, do you
fluffy
wanna
potato.
a fluffy potato? Alex, do you wanna see us off? Alex is a great
just huge.
host.
Thank you. We're gonna
Yeah.
do this again and again and again and again. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
drop everything and become a beaver researcher. And the baby beaver is ridiculous. Thank you both so much, and all of you for participating. Email if you got more questions. We got it's a recording, and thank you so much. Jen
Thank
and Jess,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been so fun. Thanks, everybody.